Alright, we're going to do a couple more like what we just did, and our directions here are still the same. Factor each four-term polynomial by grouping. So remember, when we're supposed to factor, the first thing we look at is there a GCF? In this case, there is not a term that is common, or a number and or a letter that's common to each of these four terms. So then we look and see how many terms we have. We have 4. The way we factor 4 terms is by grouping. So by grouping means that I'm going to separate out the first 2 from the last 2, and then look at these individually. Between 2x cubed and a negative x squared, what do these things have in common? Well, they have an x squared in common. So now x squared times what would give us 2x cubed? That would be a 2x. And x squared times what would give us a negative x squared? Well, that would be a minus 1. Now, we can use this if you understand that factoring by grouping is what we do when we have 4 terms. Then you kind of already have a little bit of a leg up. Whatever we pull out of these next 2 terms, we really want the other factor to be 2x minus 1, because in doing the factoring by grouping, remember these need to be the same, so then we can factor those out in just a minute. Now, what would I have to pull out of negative 10x so that when I multiplied it to 2x, I could get right back to where I started? Well, wouldn't that be a negative 5? Absolutely. Now you can check this really quickly and carefully to make sure that you get right back to where you started. Negative 5 times 2x is negative 10x, and negative 5 times negative 1 is a positive 5. So this is a correct factorization. And we needed it to be this way because now we have a common 2x minus 1 for both of those terms that we can factor out. When we pull it out of both terms, we're left with x squared and a negative 5. So this is how that factors. Alright, let's try one more. We have 6m squared minus 5mn minus 6m plus 5n. So we do not have a GCF. That's our first rule. We have 4 terms, which tells us to factor by grouping. So I'm going to separate these out and go. What do the first 2 terms have in common? They both have an m. So when we factor that out, m times what would give us 6m squared? That would be 6m. And m times what would give us negative 5mn? That would be a negative 5n. Now remember, we're factoring by grouping here. So when I pull out the GCF out of these next 2 terms, I really need it to be minus 6m minus 5n. Well, what do I have to multiply to 6m to get negative 6m? That would be a negative 1. Let's check it and make sure that we could do the distribution, get right back to where we started. Negative 1 times 6m is negative 6m, and negative 1 times negative 5n is a positive 5n. That looks very good. Now we have that common factor that we can factor out. So 6m minus 5n, if I were to factor this out, we're left with m and negative 1. So m minus 1. This is the factorization, and that is factor by grouping.